Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I want you to think for a second about your life thus far and things that you've been through. And anybody that turns around and says, yeah, everything's been great. No, I don't really know challenges in my life. Nothing has really held me back. You're probably lying to yourself. Just let's get that out there. Let's be honest. There's things that we've all dealt with. Maybe we don't realize the severity of those events and what they've done to our lives and piloted us. A lot of it goes back to our childhood. We're going to talk about healing emotional wounds from the past. And she's got a lot of insight on that. She's an amazing psychologist and has worked with so many people, families, couples, individuals, kind of figure out their past and how it got them to where they are today. She's Dr. Ann Creekmore, and she's back with us. Hi, Ann. How are you doing?
Good, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. I thought we'd talk about this today because it's
Sure.
in chapter 3 of your book, Love Yourself, Love Your Life. This
Yes.
is your life's handbook for all of us. It really is. Like when I go
Thank you.
through, it's like, oh, that's me. Yeah, I've dealt with that and all that. But the emotional wounds of the past, do you think it's fair to say that we've all suffered emotional wounds?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And all different types. And, even some of what for some may be smaller wounds would be bigger wounds for others. But a lot of those inhibit our relationships, inhibit our growth moving forward until we identify what they are.
Absolutely.
Essentially, how do you
Yeah.
heal? Let's say, and we've talked about this before, how a lot of the stuff goes back to our childhood. How do you heal from childhood traumas?
Well, that's a good question and a complicated question because, for one, well, for a whole variety of reasons. One is a lot of it is subconscious, right? It's not stuff we're aware of. In fact, it may be that even like the first year of life, that there's a lot of subconscious stuff we've absorbed. And certainly we're not going to remember that or be able to, bring that up, like certain ways our parents acted or acted towards us, and then we kind of internalize stuff, something about it, and we don't even know. Like I can think of a client, for example, that had grown up in Russia, and apparently during the communists, and there was a lot of poverty. They really didn't have the same things. It was the communist environment where they all had a certain same salary, all got a certain amount of food and kind of rations, a certain living space. It wasn't the capitalist society. And she said, now, even though she makes six figures, she still always worries about money. Or I think a car is going too fast. She remembers driving with her parents, who were both doctors, and you would think they were making a good amount, but they're making that set amount that everyone can have. And she'd be worried, like, oh, they're going to have an accident because we have no money. There isn't the money in a budget for fixing the car, and then how would they even get to work to get anything? And so now when she's in a car, and somebody's going fast, that same memory of being a child and being poor is coming up and making her afraid, as she's driving, riding along or driving along.
You know, that does come into play in a lot of our lives. Like you say, um, things that came up in our past where, let's say your parents said, man, money doesn't grow on trees. What are you doing? What's going on with that? And then you grow up thinking that, oh, I can't live in abundance. I'll never have enough money because
Exactly. It's just in your subconscious to have a poverty consciousness. And then, of course, as we know through cognitive behavioral therapy, what we say to ourselves creates our feelings and how we behave and our outcomes ultimately. And if we're saying that we're, always poor, no matter how much money we make, we're not going to ever feel abundant.
100%. I want to go back to one thing in your book here, triggers, button
Mm-hmm.
pushing in relationships. Triggers are things that trigger us from our past that come up in our current life.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, when you have a partner or you're in a relationship and that person realizes the triggers and can use them against you, you have a big problem.
Yes. Yes. Are you want to share something
Eh,
about that example or something?
I've been with people to know that there are definitely things that it could be even words, a situation that can trigger somebody. Um, and when it comes up, they realize it, but and it could not even be intentional. It could just
Right.
be it
Right.
happens. It
Exactly.
happens.
It happens all the time. Right. Hmm.
How are those triggers connected? Is that what we're going back to here? The situation in your subconscious?
Yes, I mean, it's the kind of thing where, if you're in therapy, then, which is great for everyone since we've all got triggers, we've all got stuff. And, then you kind of have the time, once a week to kind of explore these things instead of, not really having the focus on it and having someone who's kind of objective to help talk with you and be a sounding board. But it's like, anybody can trigger anybody, and not intentionally do it. Just if you have those wounds and then something comes up that resembles that, then all of a sudden you're triggered, and then you get over emotional or overreactive to the current small incident that's going on or discussion, or maybe even, you can misunderstand what's going on because you're clouded with all this emotion from the past situation coming up in your face, and getting upset still about that, feeling that pain. So
Is this?
I
Oh, I'm sorry. I there's something here in your book, chapter 3, about the
mhm,
inner child. Is that
yeah,
what we're talking about? The inner child in you is where this all resides, but it almost seems as if we're living like children, essentially, because
I
our subconscious is running on the program, if you will, from our childhood. So we're acting like children. I know it sounds like kind of a phrase, but
it's kind of like, we're, in living in a fantasy camp, we're like just projecting onto our relationships all our past stuff and seeing it as if it's there in the current situation. And then it's like, well, how do you separate that out? And it can be even, I mean, in my experience, something like 30%, and I've had colleagues tell me 40, 50% of people have complex PTSD, which is that the wounds occur repetitively when they were growing up before the age of 8, when they could use their imaginations really well, when you're young. And if you're having chronic sort of trauma or neglect or something, abuse or whatever, you mentally learn to self hypnotize and go away. And then you let your brain handle it, a different part of your brain holding the memories, and you kind of in different compartments. So actually, when you become an adult, you may still have actual parts of yourself that are actual children that are age 6 or age 3 or whatever. And when that part is out, when you switch into that because of the trigger, it's really almost like a child, that, part coming out. And that can be dealt with therapeutically with age progression, once that diagnosis is made of the complex PTSD, and the protocol is being done for the spectrum, the DID spectrum. But and then you can do hypnosis. And it's very simple to start aging them up like every 3 years per minute, once a week or so, to help them grow. But otherwise, they're frozen in time in that trauma and that decision, or how they handle that trauma. And when you get with that part of that person, you're getting you can't, reason with a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old, or
sure.
you know so that's a little aside, because some people, are the more single-minded, didn't go through the serious trauma under age 8, and they still have wounds, and you still, when they're triggered, it'll distort the interpersonal situation and make it difficult. But they would be able to kind of deal with it in a different way. Maybe just you could ask yourself, I'm really upset about this, but this seems like a situation that's not that perturbing, and what is it? What are my feelings? when did I feel this way before? And what is this triggering for me? What emotional pain from the past is getting implanted in this current situation that I need to maybe grieve or release or separate out myself.
This phrase has come up many times, even in a situation, in a relationship. You're acting like a child. You're acting like a child.
Right.
But we
Maybe
are. Right.
Very true.
Yeah. I don't
Doesn't
mean
help
that.
to say that.
I don't mean it in a negative way, but yes, because we're still being piloted by what we
By the child
learned
part.
as a child. So
Yes.
your book is called Love Yourself, Love Your Life. In chapter 3, when we talk about dealing with childhood situations, traumas, and things like that,
Yes.
loving yourself is in this chapter.
Right.
And it shows up
Absolutely.
elsewhere in the book as well. What does that mean, loving yourself?
Well, loving yourself is, being able to take care of yourself, kind of mind, body, spirit, nurturing yourself, giving to yourself, being open to receiving good and love in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and having positive self-esteem, and confidence in yourself.
How do you do that?
Well, there's, what are your thoughts about that? And when you're asking that question, do you have?
How do you get to the point where you love yourself? And I mean, top of my head would be you're comfortable in your skin, you respect yourself, we're all gonna, as much as we want to say, you can't look in the mirror and say, what the heck's going on there? Oh, look at you. What's going on? We're always going to do that. I don't think there's any way getting around that. There's always something that'll pop up. But to minimize that as much, and also to know that you're worth it, and that you matter. A lot of us go through life, and I think you would agree with this as a psychologist. Um, you are good enough. A lot of us think we're not good enough. We might not consciously think it, but we might think, I'm not good enough to own that really nice, expensive car. I'm not good enough for that job. I'm not good enough for that relationship. A big thing now in a lot of jobs is imposter syndrome, where we're working, but we feel that we're not really totally qualified for that job. Uh,
Mhm.
Getting past that, and that to me is loving yourself. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. There's some good examples. I think that loving yourself is like treating yourself like you would treat a friend, and talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend. If something was going wrong, you wouldn't point to a friend if you're being caring to them that what they need to, that this is a bad situation, or you wouldn't feed into them feeling bad. You would say something supportive.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, cognitive meaning your thoughts, what you say to yourself. So you talk to yourself like you're a friend, give yourself encouragement, point out the good in the situation, what you're grateful for, how, tell yourself it's okay. And just give yourself some bolstering to, it's a lot is what you say to yourself about a situation that causes you to feel a certain way and then behave a certain way. um, and so you always have control of your own self-talk. I mean, you can catch a negative thought and say, but I wouldn't say it to a friend. Wait, I'm crossing that out. What would I say to a friend? I'm going to say that to me. um, but
Mm.
a good analogy is about how the past gets brought into the present and how it affects you is, for example, say that you're going on a trip to Hawaii the next day and you're at work and your boss comes in and says, well, you got to get these 5,000 emails done before you leave because you're going to be gone and we need you to do it. And so, you can sit there and you can be like, folks like, well, I must work on these emails because I'm out for 2 weeks in Hawaii tomorrow. And you could talk to yourself and point out the good and what you're grateful for. And you can breeze through those emails.
Mm.
But But you can be in Hawaii at the last day of your vacation, and you can be on the beach, with a pina colada, and you're loving this, wine blue sky, and you can be thinking like, oh no, tomorrow I got to go back to work, and your whole last day laying out in the sun at the beach can be ruined. So, talk to yourself in a positive way that makes yourself feel good. I think that's how, over time, you really learn to love yourself, love your life.
You bring up a great point, and that we would never say the things that we say to ourselves to somebody that we love. And if we're supposed to love ourselves, you wouldn't, and I don't mean even verbally, even in your mind, you wouldn't walk in the mirror, in front of the mirror, and say, even into your head, oh
Right.
my God, look at you. Oh, wow, you got that going on. You've
Exactly.
got that. You'd never, somebody you love walks past you, you would never say to them, ah,
Right. Right.
what's that on
You
your
wouldn't,
face? Yeah, you gained
you
weight?
wouldn't,
Oh,
you probably wouldn't even really notice it.
and there's
It's
that.
like, so, right, exactly. So it's really, when I'm talking about talking to yourself, I'm saying your inner talk, your self-talk, that is what you have to get a handle on to start loving yourself and loving your life. Because if you got that, then you got a friend there at all times, and that's a good thing. If someone is giving you a pep talk and helping you keep going, you got yourself. You're loving yourself, and so you got to. I mean, maybe take 10 minutes and do a little exercise. Say, well, what am I saying while I'm doing this? And then listen in and see what is my subconscious consciousness that I brought in? What kind of things, attitudes am I reflecting about me? What am I saying about me? And then start catching them all the time. Say like, hey, I notice I'm always saying I'm stupid. Well then all the time, whenever you say it, you got to stop that and say, wait a minute, I'm smart. I got a high degree. I got a good job, whatever, say, and start making an effort. It might take 300 times a day. You're catching these negative subconscious thoughts, but it's kind of like having a glass of muddy water and bringing a clear pitcher of water. Just start pouring it in, and the mud will start flowing out. Eventually, you have a clear glass of water, and and it will be much easier. It won't be a big muddy glass. It might be just an occasional pour of some fresh in, but you got to get started.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you make me look at this in a different way too, in that, we say you got to love yourself. Sometimes that becomes a cliche, and it just kind of rolls off us. But if you say, be a friend to yourself, be your friend, be your best friend, be
Right.
your best friend. When
Right.
you look at it that way, it's like, yeah, I'm going to hang out with me today.
Exactly. Sounds like
Right.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to have a good time today.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
That's
it should be that way. You should get to the
absolutely
point where you enjoy time with you. I'm going on a date tonight with me, and that's all good.
exactly.
One of the things in that chapter is grief work, where we've dealt with a lot of things to, especially as you get older. And dealing with grief is one of those.
Yes.
Let's briefly hit that, because that's in that chapter of
Sure.
what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Is there anything in particular about that you wanted to share about grief?
How to
Or
overcome it. Let's, because we are talking about things from your childhood that go back and pilot us. So when it comes to, overcoming grief, healing those emotional wounds of the past, how do we do that?
well, it's becoming aware when you're feeling the grief. A lot of people are aware of when they feel angry. That's the easiest thing for
Mm,
people to feel, or to become aware of.
sure.
And feel frustrated, annoyed, or irate, or whatever it is. And then it's to go below and ask, well, what am I feeling below? Am I feeling sad? Am I having some grief, some loss, or some disappointment about something? Or am I feeling anxious about something, overwhelmed, or kind of hopeless, helpless, like I'm trying, apprehensive, that, worried? You have to kind of go below and ask yourself what's under the anger, because a lot of times people are feeling grief when they have an angry reaction, and they don't realize that underneath it is what they're feeling is sad, that they can sometimes just get to the sadness And there's like 90 toxins in sad tears compared to 10 in happy tears compared in the research. So when you actually just let yourself let it go, let yourself have your feelings and grieve, get below the anger to sad and just release it. And then, get support from yourself, get, a hug from, your loved ones, and let your feelings out. That is what causes the healing. That's when you get through the grief to the acceptance and the inner peace. Once you kind of, but you may have to, get it out more than once, but it's keep when you feel it. But it's, first of all, kind of starting to be aware of that you are having this underlying sadness. It's not just you're angry at this person and then you don't even know that it's because that it's triggering, something from your past, a wound of grief from your past. And then you just stay at the superficial level, really, and you can't really leave the underlying. It's kind of like grease, like a boiling pot, with the lid on it shaking, and you got to kind of take it off and get the feelings out to really heal it.
Anger shows up in many different forms. It's a reason. Am I right about this? That anger typically isn't anger; it's another emotion.
Absolutely. That's what I was saying. It's more like your secondary emotion that gives you a clue. Well, I'm feeling something underneath this. That, I may have really sad about something, or I'm really scared, anxious about something. Yes. And it's just more a clue. It's not really something you want to stick with. It gives you a little energy to stick with something. And also, I had a client tell me, it was cute. I had mentioned this, that when you get angry, your IQ goes down 2 standard deviations. And if you're right, you're gone down to below average in terms of your faculties at that moment to figure out the problem. So one of my clients, a young teen, said, he was working on his anger management. And he said, I want to keep my IQ up. So, and I think that's a good mantra. You want to keep your IQ, get yourself into a calmer place. Don't stick with the anger. Go and ask yourself what I'm feeling underneath, and then what will make that feel better, and try to heal that.
Wow. It's all great stuff. And this is just a piece of where you can find it in this book. Want to tell everybody your pen name is AP Filosa.
Correct.
So if you're looking for the book and you have 2, is it 2?
I have several books. I have another one, Not Fit for Human Consumption, Triggered Traumatic Memories. That's another one that would bring up some of the things we've been talking about today. And I have a couple little small ones. One is that, in fact, we're kind of putting it out as a freebie. Find Mr. and Mrs. Right, the Perfect 10. Where the top 10 things you look for and how to kind of score it when you're looking. That's kind of out there. And if people want to join my email, they can get that small free one. I got another small free.
What a great idea, finding the perfect 10.
Yeah.
With help from a psychologist. Ding, ring the bell.
Right.
And what's your email? What's your website if we want to find you, contact you?
Correct. It's that's the best place. Psychologistinvirginia.com, all spelled out. Psychologistinvirginia.com, spelled out.
Always great talking with you. Love your insight. Love the book. You could just close your eyes, open up to any page, and there's relevant, important information to really improve your life. Always great having you on here, Ann. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate you having me.
Thanks. We're coming right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.